Hey there, and welcome back to the Deep Dive. So glad you're with us today.
Great to be here.
We've got a really interesting journey ahead of us, tackling something absolutely essential if you're gearing up for those postgraduate entrance exams, mastering vocabulary.
Yep, but not just memorizing lists.
No, definitely not. It's about truly understanding how words work, in the wild. We're diving into a specific set of words today, pulled from a list that's probably familiar to many of you, Day 5, Part 1.
That's right.
And our mission? Well, it's really to go beyond the dictionary definition and see what these words do in real sentences, how they connect, and what they can tell us about the world and the texts we read.
That's the core idea, really. Words aren't static. They're dynamic tools. They convey complex ideas, relationships, states, actions, all sorts of things. And by looking at how words like, say, agent or custom or anxiety are actually used, especially in varied sentences like the ones we have here, you build a much, much deeper understanding. It's about creating a network of meaning in your mind, linking words not just to definitions, but to contexts, feelings, even other words they often appear with. This isn't just about passing an exam, though that's important.
Yeah.
It's about becoming a more confident and capable reader overall.
Absolutely. Think of this deep dive as maybe building your intuition for the language, sentence by sentence. We'll walk through this list together using the examples provided in the source material as our guides.
Good plan.
It might be helpful if you have your own copy of the list or sources handy, or, just settle in and let the words and sentences wash over you.
Yeah, active listening works too.
Engaging actively, even just by picturing the scenes the sentences create, really helps solidify the learning, I find. Ready to jump in?
Let's do it.
All right, let's kick things off with a group of words that often describe roles people play, relationships, or the entities they interact with. First up, we have agent. Our source tells us this is a noun.
Okay.
The initial example sentence is, typical agent's fees are around 6% of the sale price.
Okay, so immediately, this sentence grounds agent in a financial or commercial context, doesn't it?
Yeah, fees, sale price. Definitely.
Those terms are strong indicators. It tells us an agent is someone involved in a transaction, specifically one resulting in a sale, and they owe money a percentage fee for their work.
Right. Suggests they're facilitating the sale.
Exactly. Likely on behalf of someone else, acting as a go-between or representative. That seems to be the core idea here.
That paints a clear picture of a certain kind of agent, maybe in real estate or, general sales. But then the real test sentence from the source gives us this. Now he's living in a council flat and fielding offers from literary agents.
Ah, okay. So here's where the power of context really shines, you see.
Different world entirely.
Right. We still have that core concept, an agent acting on behalf of another person, but the domain has completely shifted. We're not talking property sales anymore. We're in the world of books and writing.
Literary agents.
Yeah. They represent authors. And they field offers likely from publishers interested in buying the author's work, their manuscript. So the specific task changes, selling a house versus handling publishing deals, but that fundamental role.
Representing someone.
As a representative, yeah.
Yeah.
Working for someone else and managing their business interactions, that remains constant.
It's fascinating how the word maintains that core meaning across such different fields. So understanding that an agent is basically a representative, acting for someone else, allows you to encounter, say, sports agent, talent agent, travel agent, and kind of instantly grasp the basic function, right? Even if the job details change.
Exactly. You recognize the pattern in the word's usage. That's key.
And seeing it used in a real test sentence context, like the one about literary agents, that's useful too. It shows how these words pop up in more varied, maybe slightly more complex situations than just simple definition examples.
Absolutely. Real-world usage is often more nuanced.
Okay, moving along the list then. The next word is agency, also a noun. Now, if an agent is the person who represents, how might agency connect?
Good question. Let's see the example.
The first example is, she works for an advertising agency.
Right. So this sentence strongly suggests that an agency is the organization, maybe the business entity, where agents often work.
Ah, the place.
Yeah, it seems to be the structure. It provides a specific service advertising, in this case, and it likely employs people who act as agents, facilitating those services for clients.
Okay, that makes sense. And the second example sentence seems to reinforce that. He managed to find a job through an agency.
This one broadens our understanding of the type of organization it could be, doesn't it?
Yeah, not just advertising.
Could be an advertising agency or maybe a recruitment agency, a job agency, or some other kind of service-providing body. The key takeaway from these two sentences seems to be that an agency is a formal structure, a business or organization offering specialized services.
Often through the work of individuals.
Right? Individuals who might be called agents. So yeah, the agent is often the person, and the agency is the place or the structure they work within to provide those services.
Okay, that relationship makes perfect sense. Now, a word that feels related in terms of acting for someone else. Deputy. It's a noun. How does deputy fit into this whole idea of representation or roles?
Let's look at the example.
First one. He was appointed deputy head of the school.
Ah, deputy head. Okay, this immediately tells us something about hierarchy, structure.
Second in command sort of thing.
Exactly. A deputy, in this sentence, is someone holding a position directly below a senior leader, the head of the school here. They're appointed to assist that leader and, crucially, probably to stand in for them when they're absent.
Right, acting on their behalf then.
Yes, it's a role of second in command with responsibilities that mirror or complement the person above them. They represent the authority of the head when needed.
Yeah, the real test sentence for deputy gives us a different setting. Deputy chiefs may be more willing to make the jump without a net.
Deputy chiefs. This places the word in maybe a higher-level organizational context, doesn't it? Like a corporation or a government department, perhaps.
Still sounds like second in command, though.
Oh, absolutely. The core idea remains. The sentence implies that people in these deputy roles might be in a unique position, senior enough to have influence and knowledge, but maybe not carrying the ultimate responsibility like the chief.
Making them potentially bolder, make the jump without a net.
That's the implication, yeah. So a deputy acts on behalf of the chief, similar in a way to how an agent acts for a client, but it's specifically within a defined hierarchical structure. It often signifies a specific rank or position.
Interesting. So agent and deputy both involve acting for another, but deputy really specifies that rank within a structure, whereas agent focuses more on the function of representation, often, like you said, commercially.
Well put. The context highlights those different facets.
Now let's bring in client, a noun. If an agent or an agency provides services, who is usually on the receiving end. The first example. Social workers must always consider the best interests of their clients.
Okay, this sentence clearly defines a client as someone receiving professional services, advice, or help. A social worker serves clients.
So it's a relationship based on getting expertise or assistance.
Yes, very much so.
The real test sentence uses it from the other side, the provider's perspective. I don't know if other clients are going to abandon me.
Ah, right. So this sentence is spoken by someone who provides something, services, goods, maybe advice to multiple clients.
And they're worried about losing them.
Exactly. They're concerned about these relationships ending. So this reinforces the idea that a client is someone engaged in a professional or business relationship where they receive something valuable, often on an ongoing basis, from the speaker.
Okay, so agents and agencies typically work for or serve their clients. That fits together nicely.
It does. The network is building.
All right, finally in this group, let's look at customer, also a noun. How does a customer compare to a client? Is there a difference, or are they basically synonyms?
An important distinction to explore. Let's see the examples.
The first sentence for customer is, improving customer satisfaction is a core company strategy.
Customer satisfaction. Okay, that's a very common business phrase, isn't it?
Definitely.
This sentence strongly links customer to a commercial transaction. A company is selling goods or services. A customer seems to be someone who buys things from a business. The focus feels like it's on the purchase and the experience around it.
And the real test sentence keeps us right there in that commercial space. The ability to guard customer data is the key to market value.
Exactly. Customer data information about people who have purchased or are likely to purchase goods or services from a company. This sentence again reinforces the idea that customer refers to the buyer in a commercial transaction.
Okay, so if we look only at the sentences provided for client and customer, what distinction can we draw? Because sometimes they feel interchangeable in everyday talk.
That's true, there can be overlap. But based strictly on these examples, what's fascinating is the subtle but pretty consistent difference shown. Okay, the client examples, social workers' clients, suggest a relationship where professional services or advice are given. It often implies a more long-term or complex interaction. You mentioned lawyer-client earlier.
Yeah.
That fits the pattern. The customer examples, however, are firmly rooted in buying and selling, the transactional exchange of goods or services buying from a company, customer data related to purchases.
So client leans more towards professional service relationships, customer more towards buyer-seller transactions, based on these sentences anyway.
That's what these specific examples suggest, yes. While in the real world, the line can blur, recognizing whether the sentence describes that professional service dynamic versus a straightforward buying interaction can really help you understand the precise meaning intended by client versus customer.
That's a great example of how sentence context provides that crucial nuance. It's not always black and white, but the clues are there.
They really are. And that skill is vital for understanding complex texts, where authors often choose words like these very carefully, paying attention to the surrounding words, the verb, the prepositions like of their clients, through an agency, to return, and the nearby nouns fees, offers, data, satisfaction, interests, gives you all the clues you need.
Right. It's about looking at the whole picture, not just a single word. Let's shift gears now. We're moving from roles and relationships to words that describe established ways of doing things, habits, traditions, maybe even official procedures. We'll start with custom, a noun.
Okay.
First example, she grew up with Chinese customs and traditions.
Right. This sentence immediately links custom to culture and society. It's paired with traditions.
Yeah, these are like shared practices.
Exactly. It refers to the traditional ways of behaving or doing things that are characteristic of a particular group, often passed down through generations. A shared practice.
But then the second example uses it differently. It was her custom to rise early.
Ah, interesting. So here, custom seems to describe an individual's habitual way of doing something.
Like a personal routine.
Precisely. A personal practice that someone follows regularly. So custom can refer to a collective cultural tradition or a personal habit. Context tells you which.
Our source also gives us a derivative. Accustomed, which is an adjective. The real test sentence for this is, state governments are well accustomed to managing forests.
Okay, well accustomed to. If we think about custom meaning a usual practice or habit.
Then accustomed must mean being used to it.
Exactly. Being very used to something, familiar with it through repeated experience. It's become like a routine or second nature for them. State governments manage forests frequently, so they are highly familiar and comfortable with the process. It's their established way of operating. You could almost say it's their custom.
So being accustomed to something means being used to it through practice, linking back to custom as a habit or established practice. That makes sense.
And notice the to after accustomed. That's a very common collocation. Accustomed to something or accustomed to doing something. Worth noting.
Okay, now let's look at a word that looks incredibly similar, but has a very different meaning. Customs, plural noun. How is this distinct from custom?
Let's see. The first example should make it clear.
We had to fill out customs forms on the plane.
Customs forms. Okay, that immediately brings to mind international travel, borders, official processes, right?
Totally. Airport stuff?
This sentence tells us that customs, used in the plural here, refers to the government department responsible for controlling goods entering and leaving a country and collecting taxes on imports and exports. The forms are required by that specific government body.
Right, and the second example gives another specific use. You must pay customs on all imports of alcohol.
Ah, pay customs. Here, customs refers not to the department itself, but to the actual taxes or duties that are collected on imported goods.
So it can be the government body or the taxes they charge.
It seems so, based on these examples. The context pay, imports, alcohol points definitively towards the taxes meaning in the second sentence, whereas forms pointed to the department in the first.
This is a really important distinction for learners, isn't it? Custom, singular, meaning habit tradition, and customs, plural, meaning border control duties, sound almost identical but are completely separate.
Absolutely critical. In the sentence context, words like forms, pay, imports, or contrasting words like Chinese traditions for the singular custom is absolutely essential for knowing which one is being used. You can't rely on sound alone here.
It really hammers home that point about seeing how words interact in sentences.
It's a classic example of words that look similar but mean different things. Context saves you every time.
Okay, our final word in this group is convention, a noun. Does this relate back to custom at all? The first example. By convention, the deputy leader was always a woman.
By convention. That phrase is a strong clue. In this sentence, convention means something like a widely accepted custom, practice, or rule, especially in social or professional settings.
Like an unwritten rule.
Sort of, yeah. An unspoken agreement or standard way of doing things that's generally followed. It's quite similar to the collective societal meaning of custom.
But just like with customs, there seems to be another meaning. The real test sentence presents something quite different. The bio recently held a convention.
Ah, yes. This is the other, very common, completely distinct meaning. Here, convention clearly refers to a large, formal assembly or meeting.
Like a conference.
Exactly. Typically involving delegates from a particular organization, industry, or interest group. Bio sounds like maybe a biological or biotech organization having its annual meeting.
So convention can mean either an accepted practice or a large formal meeting. Again, context is everything. By convention signals the practice. Held a convention signals the meeting.
You've got it. You have to be alert to which sense is intended based on the surrounding words.
And our source gives us a derivative. Conventional, an adjective. The example is, she's very conventional in her views.
Conventional views? What does that tell us about her?
Well, if convention can mean an accepted practice, then conventional views are probably views that follow the accepted ideas or norms.
Exactly. Her views are traditional, ordinary, maybe predictable. They conform to the established, widely accepted ideas. Not radical or original. Conventional describes something that aligns with those accepted practices or norms.
So conventional relates back to the accepted practice meaning of convention, not the big meeting meaning.
That's right. Seeing how convention has these two distinct meanings, and conventional clearly links to one of them, really highlights how flexible and sometimes tricky English vocabulary can be if you just rely on a single dictionary entry. You have to see the word working in the sentence.
Really drives home the importance of context.
Absolutely. That flexibility means just seeing the word isn't enough. You need the sentence to pin down the intended meaning.
All right, let's move on to our next group. This one seems to feature words related to ease, belief, and then one word that seems totally random. First up, convenience, a noun.
Okay, convenience. Let's see.
Our first example sentence for convenience is, we have provided seats for the convenience of our customers.
For the convenience of. What does that phrase suggest?
Making things easier for them, more comfortable.
Precisely. This sentence tells us that convenience refers to the quality of being suitable or useful for a particular purpose, especially by making something easier, saving time, or preventing difficulty. The seats are there to make the experience easier and more comfortable for customers.
Okay, the second example expands on this. It was a great convenience to have the school so near.
Right. Here, convenience refers to something that is convenient, something that helps make life easier.
Like the nearby school itself is the convenience.
Exactly. Having the school nearby provides ease and saves effort, like avoiding a long commute. It's an example of a convenience.
And the derivative, convenient, is an adjective. The example, a bicycle is often more convenient than a car in towns.
More convenient. Okay, so this sentence uses the adjective to describe the bicycle. It's telling us the bicycle is more practical, easier to use, or more suitable than a car for getting around towns.
So it's the thing that provides the convenience.
Exactly. The relationship between convenience, the quality or the helpful thing, and convenient, describing something that offers that quality, is very direct and clear here.
Okay, so convenience is about ease and suitability. What about its opposite? Inconvenience, a noun. That in prefix usually signals an opposite, right?
It certainly does. It's a common pattern. Let's see the example.
I have already been put to considerable inconvenience.
Put to considerable inconvenience. Oof, that sounds like someone's had a lot of trouble or difficulty.
Yeah, it doesn't sound good.
Exactly. Based on this sentence, inconvenience means trouble, difficulty, bother, or a situation that causes annoyance or difficulty. To be put to inconvenience means to experience these difficulties. As the prefix suggests, it's the direct opposite of convenience.
Now let's look at convince, a verb. This seems like a complete shift away from ease and difficulty.
Let's see how it's used.
The first example. I'd be very surprised if this argument convinces anybody.
Argument convinces anybody. Okay, this sentence tells us that convince is about changing someone's belief or opinion, doesn't it?
Making them believe something is true.
Yes, exactly. To convince someone means to make them believe that something is true, valid, or correct, usually by presenting evidence or using logical arguments. The argument's purpose is to make people accept the point being made.
Okay, The real test sentence uses it in the passive voice, but still related to belief. If you're not convinced of the inherent value in taking a year off to explore interests, then consider its financial impact.
Right. If you're not convinced of the value. Here, convinced, as part of the passive, are convinced means not believing.
So it uses the structure convinced of something to mean believing in its truth or value.
Precisely. It's a very common structure. So the sentence is saying if believing in the inherent value isn't enough reason for you, maybe the financial aspect will make you believe it's a good idea.
Got it. So convince is primarily about changing someone's belief, making them think something is true or valid. Now what about persuade, also a verb? Our source material suggests they're related, maybe synonyms, but often there's a subtle difference.
Yes, this is a classic pair. Let's see how the examples differentiate them.
The first sentence for persuade. No one was persuaded by his arguments.
Okay, again, we see arguments involved, just like with convince. But this sentence, it feels like it implies a different outcome or goal.
How so?
Well, to persuade someone, based on this usage, often means to use arguments or reasoning to influence them to do something, or to change their decision, attitude, or course of action. It feels more action-oriented.
So his arguments didn't succeed in getting people to agree to do something, or change their minds about an action.
That's the feeling I get from this sentence, yes.
The real test sentence seems to make this even clearer. Nothing could persuade me to return to the kind of life Kelsey used to advocate, and I once enjoyed.
Persuade me to return. There you go. This sentence explicitly shows persuade being used to mean influencing someone to take a specific action in this case, going back to a previous way of life.
Okay, so based purely on the examples provided for both words, how would you sum up the key difference between convince and persuade? It seems subtle.
It is subtle, but these sentences highlight it well. Convince often focuses on the mind making someone believe something is true. Convince that X is true or convince someone of X.
Right, the belief part.
Whereas persuade often focuses on action or decision, getting someone to do something. Persuade someone to do Y.
So you might convince someone that taking a year off is valuable, but you might need to persuade them to actually do it.
That's a great way to put it. And recognizing the grammatical structure that often follows the verb, like that clause about belief for convince versus an infinitive to do something for persuade, is often the key indicator. This distinction can be really important in exam questions asking about nuance or author's intent.
That subtle difference is a perfect example of why seeing words in context is so powerful. Helps you avoid just picking a near synonym and missing the precise meaning.
Absolutely.
All right, last word in this section, and yeah, it feels totally out of place based on ease and belief. Continent, a noun.
Yes, quite a shift.
Let's see. First example. The police investigation spanned 3 continents.
Okay, this sentence uses continent in its most common geographical sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, like Asia, Africa, Europe. One of the world's large landmasses.
Exactly. The investigation covered a vast physical area across these large landmasses.
But the second example adds a little twist. They plan to spend the summer on the continent. Notice the capital C and the...
Good catch. What's interesting here is that when capitalized and used with the continent often specifically refers to the mainland of Europe.
As opposed to?
As distinct from places like the British Isles. It's a specific geographical convention used in certain English-speaking contexts, particularly British English historically.
Okay, that's a specific usage to be aware of. And the derivative continental, an adjective, would just mean relating to a continent in general.
Typically, yes. Like a continental breakfast is supposedly typical of the European continent. Or continental climate refers to the climate found in the interior of large continents, far from the moderating influence of the sea. It describes something characteristic of or located on a continent.
This word serves as a good reminder that sometimes words just have completely unrelated meanings or origins, like convention, meaning a meeting or a practice.
Right.
You can't always guess meaning based on sound or spelling. The sentence context is your indispensable guide. Continent is entirely unrelated to convince or convenience, showing you need to treat each word and its uses individually, even if they start with the same letters.
A crucial point for building reliable vocabulary knowledge. Context, context, context.
Let's move on to another set of words, this time focusing more on qualities, states, and describing difficulty. First up, rough, an adjective.
Rough, okay.
The first example sentence for rough is, there were about 20 people there at a rough guess.
At a rough guess. What does rough mean in that common phrase?
Not exact.
Yep.
Proximate.
Precisely. In this phrase, rough means approximate, not exact or precise. There's a general idea or estimate, but without fine detail, a ballpark figure.
Okay, but the next example uses it very differently. The skin on her hands was hard and rough.
Ah, yes. A completely different sense here. This sentence uses rough to describe a physical texture, not smooth, uneven, maybe coarse.
So rough can mean approximate or physically uneven, not smooth. Two distinct meanings.
It seems so. And our source provides the adverb roughly. The real test sentence is, fossil fuels, coal, oil, gas, still generate roughly 85% of the world's energy supply.
Roughly 85%. So that links back to the first meaning, right?
Exactly. Roughly here means approximately or about. It modifies the number, indicating it's an estimation, not an exact figure. It ties directly back to the rough guess meaning of the adjective rough. Adverbs derived from adjectives often carry that core meaning but modify verbs, adjectives, or other adverbs.
Next, thorough, an adjective. Now, how does this compare to rough in that sense of approximate? Feels like the opposite.
It very much does. Let's look at the example. You will need a thorough understanding of the subject.
A thorough understanding. That sounds like the opposite of a rough guess. Deep, complete, detailed.
Exactly. Thorough, based on the sentence, means complete, detailed, careful, and accurate. A thorough understanding leaves no gaps. It's comprehensive. It is indeed the conceptual opposite of a rough, surface-level idea.
And the derivative is thoroughly, an adverb, the real test sentence. The most thoroughly studied intellectuals are the ministers and political leaders.
Most thoroughly studied. Okay, so here thoroughly means completely and in detail. It modifies the verb studied, describing the manner of the study not superficially, but deeply and comprehensively.
So thorough and thoroughly are all about completeness, detail, and accuracy. They stand in clear contrast to rough and roughly, which imply approximation or lack of detail. Seeing these pairs together really helps solidify both concepts, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. Building those conceptual links between near opposites or words with related roots is a very powerful vocabulary strategy.
Okay, let's look at absolute, an adjective.
Absolute.
The first example, I've joined a class for absolute beginners.
Absolute beginners. What does that imply about their level?
Total beginners. Zero experience.
Yes, exactly. Here, absolute is used as an intensifier. It means complete, total, or pure. These are beginners with absolutely no prior knowledge or experience whatsoever.
Okay. The real test sentence is a bit more formal, more abstract. France has decided its fashion industry has lost an absolute right to define physical beauty for women.
An absolute right. In this legal or social context, absolute means unconditional, complete, and without any limitations or qualifications.
Like a total, unrestricted right.
That's the idea. The fashion industry no longer has a right that is total and unrestricted in this area, according to the sentence.
And the adverb absolutely. The example. Training is absolutely essential in this business.
Absolutely essential. Again, similar to absolute beginners, absolutely here functions as an intensifier. It means completely or totally essential. It emphasizes that training isn't just important, it's entirely necessary, non-negotiable.
So absolute and absolutely are frequently used to mean complete, total, or without limitation. They often serve to emphasize or intensify the word they modify, whether it's describing a beginner's level, the nature of a right, or the necessity of training.
Exactly. They signal totality or a lack of exceptions or conditions.
Finally in this group, tough, an adjective. How might this relate to rough? Sometimes these words feel like they could overlap in meaning.
And that's a good point. Let's examine the examples carefully. First, it can be tough trying to juggle a career and a family.
Tough trying. That just means difficult, challenging, right?
Exactly. Based on this sentence, tough means difficult, demanding, or requiring considerable effort, endurance, or resilience. Juggling multiple responsibilities is presented as hard work.
Okay. The real test sentence uses it similarly, describing a period of time. Sometimes it is easy to feel bad because you're going through tough times.
Tough times. Again, tough describes periods that are difficult, hard to endure, or unpleasant. Hardship.
Now, tough can sometimes mean physically strong or resilient, like tough meat or a tough negotiator. But the sentences provided here seem to focus exclusively on the meaning of difficult or challenging.
That's right. Based solely on these examples, tough describes hardship or difficulty, whereas rough, in its examples, described either physical texture or approximation.
So while they might both relate to things that aren't easy, like a rough texture isn't smooth, a rough guess isn't exact, and a tough task isn't simple, The specific nuances highlighted here are distinct. Tough is about difficulty hardship. Rough is about texture approximation.
Precisely. And again, it's the company the word keeps guess, skin, times, trying to juggle, that locks in the intended meaning in each case.
Okay, let's wrap up with our final group of words for today. These often describe internal states, feelings, or physical qualities and actions, starting with tender, an adjective.
Tender. Okay, this word has a few different common uses. Let's see what the examples show.
The first one. What he needs now is a lot of tender, loving care.
Tender, loving care. TLC, that's a very common phrase. What does tender imply there?
Gentle, kind, caring.
All of those. In this context, tender means gentle, kind, and showing care and affection. It describes a gentle, emotional quality applied when caring for someone.
Okay, the second example. Her expression became soft, almost tender.
Here, tender describes an emotional quality reflected in a person's look or facial expression.
Like a gentle, affectionate look.
Exactly. Possibly indicating emotional sensitivity or softness. It's related to the idea of kindness and emotional warmth shown in the first example.
Now, I know from everyday life that tender also means soft and easy to chew, like a tender piece of meat.
Right.
But that usage isn't in these specific examples, which is a perfect illustration that words can have multiple meanings, and you need the sentence to tell you which one is relevant here.
A very important point. Always prioritize the meaning directly supported by the given sentence context, especially in a learning or testing situation.
Next is mild, an adjective. How does this compare to tender? Could they ever overlap? Both seem to imply gentleness sometimes.
They can both suggest gentleness, yes. Let's look at the first example for mild. He prefers to live where the climate is mild.
Mild climate. That means not extreme, right? Gentle weather.
Correct. Here, mild describes a physical condition, specifically climate, meaning gentle, moderate, and not harsh, not too hot, not too cold, not too stormy.
Okay. The real test sentence uses it in a less physical sense. That's a mild and detached way.
In this sentence, mild describes a manner or attitude. It means calm, gentle, not strong, intense, or severe. A mild way of saying or doing something is not aggressive or forceful. It lacks intensity.
So based on these examples, both tender and mild can suggest gentleness or lack of intensity, but they seem to apply in different domains. Tender was about care, affection, emotional expression, while mild here relates to physical conditions like climate or a gentle, non-intense manner or attitude.
That's a good summary based on these sentences. While there's a conceptual link around gentleness, the typical applications shown here differ. They wouldn't be interchangeable in these specific examples. The nouns or adverbs they modify, care, expression versus climate, way, really guide the meaning.
Now, vulnerable, an adjective. This often describes a state of being susceptible. The first example, we should protect the most vulnerable members of our society.
Most vulnerable members. Who are these people likely to be based on that word?
People easily harmed or attacked.
Exactly. Based on this sentence, vulnerable means easily harmed, attacked, or negatively affected. This harm could be physical, emotional, social, or economic. Vulnerable members are those susceptible to being hurt, disadvantaged, or exploited.
Okay. The real test sentence applies it to something non-human. These jobs are so vulnerable to technology in the first place.
Vulnerable to technology. This shows vulnerable can also mean easily affected or harmed by an external force or change, in this case, technological advancements.
So technology can potentially harm these jobs, make them obsolete.
Right. It shows their susceptibility to that external factor. The structure, vulnerable to, is a key pattern here, indicating what the subject is susceptible to. Understanding that phrase really helps clarify the meaning. It's a very common and important structure, especially in academic and journalistic writing.
How does feeble, an adjective, relate to vulnerable? Do they describe similar kinds of weakness? The first example for feeble. You're a bit feeble nowadays.
A bit feeble. This strongly suggests weakness, doesn't it? Particularly related perhaps to age or illness.
Yeah, lack of physical strength.
It describes a lack of physical strength or vitality, seeming to come from within the person.
Okay. The second example uses it differently.
Yeah.
She made a feeble attempt to explain what had happened.
Here, feeble describes the attempt itself. It means the attempt was weak, ineffective, or lacked effort, force, or conviction.
Like it didn't have much strength behind it.
Exactly. So feeble can mean physically weak from within or weak in effort force. Now, how does this compare to vulnerable based on our examples?
Well, feeble seems to be about internal weakness or lack of force, whereas vulnerable was about being open to harm from outside forces.
That's precisely the distinction these sentences show. Feeble is about a lack of internal strength or force. Physical weakness, weak effort. Vulnerable, however, is about being open or susceptible to harm or attack from external factors. Societal pressures, technology. While a feeble person might certainly be more vulnerable, the words themselves describe different aspects of weakness or susceptibility, internal lack versus external susceptibility.
That's a clear and useful distinction drawn directly from the examples. Very helpful. Next word. Tremble, which can be a verb or a noun.
Tremble.
Read the verb example. My legs were trembling with fear.
Trembling with fear. What's happening physically?
Shaking uncontrollably because of the fear.
Yes, the verb tremble means to shake involuntarily, often as a physical reaction to strong emotion like fear, excitement, or even due to cold or weakness. The sentence explicitly shows fear as the cause of the shaking.
And the noun example. The only sign of fear was a slight tremble in his legs.
Here, the noun tremble refers to the physical act of shaking itself, the shaking movement.
So the verb is the action, to shake, and the noun is the instance of that shaking.
Exactly. And this word connects back nicely to feelings like fear we just discussed. Anxiety could also cause a tremble, and physical states like weakness, feeble people might tremble. It describes a specific physical reaction often linked to internal states.
Gives you a precise word for that kind of shaking. Now, lean, another word that can be an adjective or a verb. And like convention or continent, the meanings seem quite different depending on the part of speech.
Yes, context will be crucial here. Let's see the adjective first.
Adjective example. This is the leanest time of the year for the tourist industry.
The leanest time. What does that suggest for businesses and tourism during this period?
Not much business. Difficult times. Unproductive.
Exactly. Here, as an adjective, lean describes a period that is unproductive, difficult, or lacking in something essential like business or money. It means lacking abundance, like a lean harvest means a small one. The leanest time is the most difficult or least profitable period.
Okay, but the verb example is entirely different. The old man was leaning heavily on a stick.
Right. What's fascinating here is the verb lean means to support oneself at an angle against something, or to incline or bend from a vertical position.
Resting his weight on the stick.
Precisely. This sentence describes a physical action of resting one's weight against an object for support, completely different from the lacking abundance meaning of the adjective.
So just like with convention, lean has two totally different meanings depending on its grammatical role. Adjective, lacking, unproductive, versus verb, to incline for support. The sentence structure and surrounding words, time of year, on a stick, are your absolute best clues.
It really underscores the point that polysemy, a word having multiple meanings, is incredibly common in English, and context is always king. You can't assume meaning.
Two more words left on our list for today. Next, amiable, an adjective.
Amiable, okay.
The first example, her parents seemed very amiable.
Very amiable. What kind of impression does that give you of her parents?
Friendly, pleasant, easy to talk to.
Yes, exactly. Based on this sentence, amiable means friendly, pleasant, and easy to get along with. It describes a person's pleasant disposition towards others.
The second example reinforces this. I've only met Jane once, but she seems amiable enough.
This confirms that amiable describes someone's friendly and pleasant nature. Amiable enough suggests she meets a certain standard of being easy to interact with, friendly.
How does amiable compare to words like tender or mild that also describe gentle qualities? We touched on this slightly.
Right. While tender can describe gentle care or affection, and mild can describe a general lack of harshness, like climate or manner, amiable specifically focuses on friendliness and pleasantness in social interaction. An amiable person is someone whose company you would likely enjoy because they are friendly and easygoing towards others. It's about social agreeableness.
Okay, makes sense. Our final word for this deep dive. Anxiety, a noun.
Anxiety, a common feeling.
The first example. Waiting for exam results is a time of great anxiety.
Great anxiety. That sounds like significant worry or nervousness, doesn't it?
Definitely. Unease.
It does. Based on this sentence, anxiety is a feeling of worry, nervousness, or unease, typically about an uncertain outcome or a future event, like waiting for exam results. It's a state of mental distress or apprehension.
The real test sentence emphasizes the intensity and the impact of the feeling. I had so much anxiety that I would wake up in the middle of the night and stare at the ceiling.
Wow, this sentence shows how severe anxiety can be, so much anxiety, and its physical consequences like disrupting sleep. It really reinforces anxiety as a significant feeling of worry or unease that can have real effects.
And finally, the derivative anxious, an adjective, the real test sentence. Many of us are weighed down by the past or anxious about the future.
Anxious about the future. So if anxiety is the feeling or state, then anxious is the adjective describing someone who is experiencing that feeling.
Feeling worried or nervous about the future.
Exactly. This sentence tells us that being anxious means feeling worry, nervousness, or apprehension, often specifically about future events or uncertainty.
So anxiety is the noun for the state or feeling, and anxious is the adjective describing a person feeling that way. And connecting back, intense anxiety could potentially cause a person to tremble, right? Shows how feelings and physical states link up.
It's all interconnected, absolutely. Understanding these words helps us talk about and understand the human experience, both internal feelings and external interactions, much more precisely.
Wow, okay. We've covered a substantial list today from Day 5, Part 1. We went through everything from agent and deputy describing roles,
To custom and convention for practices and gathering.
words like convince and persuade
Yeah.
about influencing belief and action.
And finally, words like anxiety and vulnerable, dealing with states and feelings. Quite a range.
It really was. And like the process we followed, going word by word, sentence by sentence, really showed why this contextual approach is so important.
I agree. It wasn't just about reading definitions. It was about seeing these words in action. We saw how the exact same word form, like convention or lean, could have completely different meanings depending entirely on the sentence it was sitting in.
Yeah.
We saw how seemingly similar words like client and customer or convince and persuade actually have distinct nuances in typical usage that are revealed by their surrounding words and the overall sentence structure.
And recognizing those patterns, the collocations, the grammatical role, the structure of the phrase, that's really the heart of building strong reading comprehension, isn't it?
It really is.
It's not just memorizing that tough can mean difficult. It's seeing tough times and knowing in that moment it means difficult, not physically strong. Or seeing vulnerable to technology and understanding the specific kind of susceptibility being described.
Exactly. This approach builds that intuitive feel for the language that allows you to process complex texts much more fluently and accurately. And the real test sentences were particularly valuable, I thought, because they show these words embedded in more natural, flowing language than you might find in isolated dictionary examples. They require you to apply that contextual understanding in a more realistic way.
It's interesting, too, how many of these words describe relationships or states of being agent and client, deputy and hyph, amiable people interacting, vulnerable groups, feeling anxiety. Learning vocabulary isn't just about isolated words. It's about learning the language we use to describe the world around us, human interactions, internal experiences.
In the physical world, too, whether it's a rough texture or a mild climate or the very concept of a continent, it covers all bases.
It really does feel like building blocks. You learn how rough describes an estimate, how thorough describes a detailed study, and then maybe you can understand a sentence about needing a thorough plan to navigate the rough terrain of a complex negotiation. You see how the individual word meanings combine to create a larger picture.
That ability to combine and understand is where true reading power comes from. Seeing these words used naturally, like in your source material, is definitely the best way to develop that skill.
Well, that was a deep dive indeed into this section of vocabulary from Day 5, Part 1. We've journeyed through words describing everything from professional roles and relationships to cultural practices, formal gatherings, qualities of ease and difficulty, emotional states, and physical descriptions. Quite a mix.
And we did it, as you said, not by staring at definitions, but by really immersing ourselves in the sentences themselves, seeing how these words function dynamically and how their meaning is shaped by context. This process, I think, is invaluable for anyone preparing for challenging exams or simply aiming to become a more perceptive reader in general.
Definitely. And as you, our listener, continue your own learning journey, here's maybe a thought to carry with you. We've seen how words like agent and client describe relationships, right? And words like anxiety and vulnerable describe internal or external states. How much of understanding language is actually understanding the fundamental connections between people, ideas, experiences, the physical world that these words are used to represent?
That's a great point.
So as you encounter new vocabulary, perhaps think not just about its dictionary definition, but about the story the word is telling within that specific sentence, the relationships, the states, the actions it's describing.
that perspective can truly transform how you approach vocabulary learning. It makes it much more active and meaningful.
We certainly hope this deep dive has been valuable for you. We encourage you to revisit these words and sentences, maybe try writing some of your own using them. Feel free to share your own examples or questions. Learning is a journey, and it's always better when shared.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
We look forward to continuing the journey together next time.